Hey, and welcome back to Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. My name is Mark Pattison, former NFL player, now climbing the 7 summits. Boy, I've got Mount Everest ahead of me and hoping I can take the top in about 10 months. And I can tell you, I have been training like a mother, and I will not leave any rock unturned. It's a big mountain. It's a big boy, and there's a lot of issues that happened up there this last year. And I want to make sure I put myself in the best position to make it up and make it down in a very safe way. Okay, today on the pod, normally at this point, I talk about a very quick quote. Today I'm going to quote myself. And it is called, "It takes a little more to make a champion." And I think this guy, Howard Behar, totally amplifies that. Howard is a guy I've known for about 20 years. Howard was what I call the big three. There was Howard Schultz, who was the founder of Starbucks, Howard Behar, and another guy named Orrin Smith. And essentially those three guys took Starbucks from a very teeny tiny Seattle-based coffee outfit, had around 28 stores, and blew that out to over 15,000 over the years that Howard was there. So total fascinating conversation. Life is not rainbows and butterflies from the standpoint of everything you do, from your personal situations to your business situations. And we go through it with Howard. And Howard's got all these great sayings. We also talk about the 6 Ps that he literally lives by on a daily basis, which really get him through and keep him really humble, I think, about the way he lives his life, about the way he serves others. And many of these lessons learned from people in his past and certainly from his time at Starbucks. So stay tuned for that. He's coming up. Fascinating story. And as always, please go and check out my website at www.markpattisonnfl.com. Public speaking, I love to talk about finding your greatness, about stepping into the fear. Also, I wrote a book, and that is there, as well as a e-learning course. So the key thing, too, I'm really asking people to do, I'm coming up on about 100 reviews, but go into my website on the tab that says podcast, and you can rate and review, and it totally helps me in terms of better visibility, finding your summit on iTunes and the Apple world. And don't we all need inspiration? I certainly do. So many of these different people that I talk to have these great stories. So go do that if you would and if you will. And let's make that happen, okay? So on that note, let's go listen to Howard. Here we go. Hey, everybody, it's Mark Pattison back again with another great episode of Finding Your Summit, all about people overcoming adversity and finding their way. And this week, I've got a very special guest. I first met him probably 15 years ago, maybe 20, when I was starting a company with a few other guys called Front Porch Classics. And my guest this week, his name is Howard Behar. Howard, how are you doing?
I'm doing terrific, Mark.
Yeah, and the reason why I kind of opened up that way is because one of the reasons why we had asked you to come over and be an advisor for our little budding company at the time was because you've had this just amazing run at Starbucks. You know, obviously you've been retired now for quite some time, but you know, there's just so many lessons learned. And I don't know if this podcast is necessarily going to be about you and some amazing adversity that you had to go over or go through, but really about when you take a small little company. I think there's only a handful, 28 stores or so, when you came on board of Starbucks. And really I believe it was yourself, Howard Schultz, and Orrin, who really took that company to incredible heights, the kind of heights that, you know, all companies, all founders, you know, I've been one in my past, we want to go to, we want to reach. And so I kind of want to dig back into that because I think on this side of the fence, anywhere you go, certainly in the U.S., North America, in various parts of the world, you see a Starbucks on the corner, and it's just like a name brand. And you know, you walk in and you have, you know, all these different drinks that you're used to having, consistency. But when you really dial it back, I know these things are not easy and smooth roads, and I think I want to get into that part of the message because I'm sure it wasn't always just rainbows and butterflies all the way to the top.
No, nobody's life ever is like that, right? And it's funny you talk about doing mountain climbing, and I always thought, who does that? Who climbs a mountain? Then I thought to myself, well, everybody has their own mountain.
Yep.
You're talking about climbing Everest, which is a huge deal to do. Well, I never thought about the physical part of my life. I'm not a physical person like you are, but my challenges have been emotional and mental, and that's to believe in myself. It took me a long, long time to get to the point in my life where I actually thought I was worthwhile, and I was actually in my 30s before it really kind of came together. And then when Starbucks came along, I believed that I could do things, particularly in the business world. That was a skill set that I developed. But Starbucks, I was trying to escape corporate life when I went there. I thought, I'd been president of a land development company in the Seattle area that got in trouble and we had to sell it. And I was president of the time, and it was kind of disappointing to have failed in that. And so I was out looking to buy a business, and what happened was, by accident, I get introduced to this young guy named Howard Schultz.
Yeah.
And he had this mountain he wanted to climb. He wanted to be a star. He wanted to be huge. And I looked at this little 28-store company, and I said, well, okay, I can do this. This is never going to be huge, and that's great because I didn't want all the corporate stuff anymore. And before I knew it, I was back in it again. And it presented its own unique challenges because we operated at the end. When I retired, we were in 70 some countries, probably 60 or 70 languages that although I didn't have to speak those, I had to have people that did, and I had to be able to listen, even with people that couldn't speak the language that I was speaking. You find a way to listen with your eyes and with your heart. And so it was a challenge. Everybody thinks that Starbucks was this race to the top. It wasn't. We almost went broke. We almost lost it all. It wasn't working well when I got there. We were losing money in Chicago, and we weren't going to raise any more money unless we figured that out. And I had to do that along with the team. And so, all of that's a challenge. And so everybody's mountain is a little different. I think your mountains have been higher, than mine in some sense, but I had my own.
Well, I think, when you start talking about mountains, you certainly can relate them to being very metaphorical. And I think that's what you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And so, and just like when you break it down, I don't think it's just like Mark and his mountains and you with Starbucks. I think you opened up and you said something that is right on point, which is, can be very emotional and mental and all these other things. And so between relationships and your workplace and how you raise your kids and how you pay it forward, and this whole thing about servant leadership, which I want to get into, I think that's all part of how you learn. And you don't, I think you said it perfectly from the standpoint of you don't just all of a sudden, rise to the top, right? You have to learn through having a couple bumps along the road. So I want to ask you something that you just mentioned, and that was about when this young brash kid named Howard Schultz, who is the founder and CEO of Starbucks Coffee, why in his mind did he have such a broad vision on what this could become? Why did he think this whole thing was going to work?
Well, at the beginning, he didn't really know. It's like all of us. He was raised in kind of an abusive home, and when he got into the workforce and ended up joining Starbucks as an employee, he was driven to succeed because his parents never thought he could. That was his mountain, and it was a huge one for him. And so he ended up buying this little company that had 6 stores, and then he grew up from there. But he had this tremendous desire to achieve. I think like nobody I've ever known. All entrepreneurs, there's one word that could describe them, and that's persistence. Yeah. And Howard if you said no to Howard, he didn't understand it. That was some foreign language. It just was the beginning of the conversation. If you said, Howard, I don't know if we should do that, he'd go to the next office and he'd talk to the next person and say, what do you think? And he'd find somebody that agreed with him. Then he'd come back and say, well, Joe agrees with me. Why don't you? It was this tremendous persistence, but he just had this dream. I don't think that he actually knew. I think it's probably like any of us. We set out to climb that mountain. We don't know whether we're going to get to the top. We have a vision of it, right? If we're strong, we have a vision of getting to the top, but nobody is ever absolutely positively sure, and he wasn't either. But what he believed is that that if he was persistent enough that he could be successful at it. And he was right. I mean, he saw it before anybody else on the team saw it. He certainly saw it before I did. And once I saw it, then I grabbed on. I said, this is going to be huge. And Orrin was the same way.
Yeah. So what was it about you? Okay. So now so let's just be clear and reset the story really quickly. So for people who don't know, Starbucks was an existing very, very small brand in Seattle. The couple guys owned it, and there was an opportunity, I think, where Howard had gone down and he was working for those guys. And then somehow another circumstance presented itself where he could turn around and he was going to buy the name. So he didn't come up with the name, but somebody else did. And those 6 stores. And then from there he took it to store 28. And then you come along. What was it in Howard Schultz when he was looking at you to come in at a more senior level? What was he looking from you to do to help you grow this thing?
Well, at the beginning, he and I met a year before I joined the company, and he had this long list of criteria that he wanted in a person. He wanted a VP of sales and operations. And the first thing on the criteria, college degree. I didn't have that. The second thing on the list was he wanted somebody with food service experience. And he went down the list till finally got to the end. Number 10, can you breathe? I could breathe. But that was about it on the list, And so we kind of shook hands and parted company. And a year later, by happen chance, I met Howard again. I met somebody that had been one of Howard's investors, and he kept saying, we need a guy like you. And so Howard and I met again, and I volunteered to work for a week in the company for free, where he could look at me, I could look at the company and see. And at the end of that week, I knew it was the right place for me. And I think what Howard got in me, and I don't think he knew it at the time, was he got somebody that was, I had my own beliefs about life at that point in time. I was really strong skills on the people side. I was a servant leader before I started at Starbucks. And I also was, I didn't want to report to a CEO. I wanted to report to a partner. I don't think Howard understood that quite well at the beginning, and it caused lots of struggles at the beginning between Howard and I, but we worked it out, and I was probably one of the few people that could actually challenge him and say, wait a minute, I don't think we should be doing that. And sometimes we'd get blowout arguments, but we sorted it out and became good friends. But I think it was the people side that he saw in me, and I think that's what I brought to the party.
Yeah, so there's this word called servant leadership. You certainly throw that around quite a bit with some different books, and we'll get into those here in just a bit. But let's go get into the definition based on your world on what that exactly means.
Well, in its purest form, it's that leaders are there to serve, not be served. There was a man named Robert Greenleaf who was the head of organizational development at AT&T in the 40s and 50s. And when he retired, he looked back at his career and he asked himself a question: who are the leaders that somehow made it happen at AT&T? And long after they left, their organizations kept going. And he came to the conclusion that the leaders that understood whether, intrinsically, even if they, had never studied or whatever, that they were there to serve their people in their people's journey of accomplishing what they wanted to do. And if they did that well, then their people would serve the organization. And so he figured that out. And he figured out that the people that didn't do that, their organizations did not grow after they left. They faltered. And so he came to that conclusion. It was the leaders that somehow knew that they were there to serve rather than be served. It's an interesting thing because I run into so many leaders that think that they're there to be served, not to serve.
I bet you do. Yeah. I mean, I know your sphere of influence is great. Peeling back the kind of the layers of the onion here. So, I don't think you just roll out of bed and you have this mentality and around this whole servant leadership. So you must have learned it from somebody else. I mean, you just mentioned somebody else, but that was before your time.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
It actually came from a guy who I'm still probably my biggest mentor in my life, a guy named Jim Jensen. And Jim, when I was in my mid-20s, he was the CEO of a company called Grand Tree Furniture Rental. And I came to that company without really believing in myself. I mean, I was competent, but not consciously. I just did things well. I had a smile on my face. I worked hard. I cared about what I did. But he was the one that finally got me to start looking at myself And he put us through Pacific Institute. You remember that? Lou Tice,
Yeah.
Pacific Institute,
Sure.
and Omega, a guy named John Boyle. And that was the beginning of me looking at myself and saying, who am I? What do I stand for? And what am I really able to do in life? And, I started a process he taught me about affirmations, about visualization,
Yeah.
and that really changed my life. And along that journey, he gave me this little pamphlet called The Servant as Leader, written by Robert Greenleaf. And that began my journey. And that was almost 50 years ago. That's hard to believe.
Yeah.
And I've read that book probably 200 times and tons of other books. And so that journey of beginning to learn about myself got me interested in learning about others. What makes me tick? And then I said, what makes other people tick?
Yeah.
And so I began to learn about it, and I began to internalize it and make it my own. And that servant leadership journey is on. It still goes on today.
Yeah, there's two pieces in that I want to break down a little bit. I think number one is that you have to be a confident person in you and your abilities, even though if you don't know everything, to sometimes hire people that are smarter than you, and knowing that that's not going to be a threat to your position.
Yeah, absolutely.
Blown out, right?
Absolutely, that's the key to it. If you're not hiring people smarter than you, then you're going nowhere. Because anytime you have to have an organization, you can't possibly know everything, nor should you know everything.
Yeah.
And you want different kinds of people. We talk a lot about diversity today. Primarily it's diversity of thought because of our experiences in life, our different experiences. But you need to have that, and you need to have really competent, diverse team.
Yeah, the other part of that too is you were talking about these affirmations and listening and this type of thing. And when we started Front Porch Classics, we ended that the company ultimately got sold, but it 700 different retail locations, and that included some magazines and .coms and retailer stores and stuff like that in 7 different countries. But the key of all that was really, to me at least, was this thing. When people ask me, what in your opinion is the thing that can make you the best salesperson? And everybody thinks, and not everybody, but many people think about it from the standpoint of what kind of information can I deliver, and all the secrets and all the cues and everything else that leads you to the ultimate treasure is listening, right?
Absolutely, number one thing.
People love to talk about themselves, man.
Yeah.
And, right. And so I think, one of the things that you were just talking about is taking back and taking notice from reading books, listening to what other people have to say, and really, what did they get out of this and what is their journey? So much of what I listen to on my audio tapes and on my podcast, I don't listen to some Mickey Mouse story. Not that those aren't entertaining at times, but they're all authentic, real journeys that people have taken, because that's where I find I can get the most out of my journey and where I'm trying to go. Because I certainly don't know it at all, and I have a lot more to go. And there's so many wise people out there that can teach me things that I've never, learned, or I didn't know about, or maybe there's some pitfall that's ahead of me that they're going to give me awareness about.
Yeah, an amazing thing about that, it doesn't have to be somebody famous. We can learn from everybody if we're open to learning. My grandchildren are the ones that taught me about recycling, because they were learning it in class, in grade school. I never thought about it. I'm 75 years old. My idea of recycling was just putting it in the garbage can until they taught me, about it. So, and all along the way, from teachers that you have, from friends that you have, you guys taught me a lot. French Port Classics was so creative.
Yeah.
And that was such an interesting journey, And so you learn from everybody that you run into, as long as you're open to it. And then you have the people that you're talking about, my Jim Jensen's, or the books that I read, Lou Tice, or one time I was watching a TV program about the guy that started CNN, and he was talking about his relationship with his dad and how abusive his dad was, and how he always wanted to get approval from his dad. And I realized I'd gone down that journey too. And so you learn from everybody, and it reinforces things or gets you to think about things in a different way than you previously had.
Yeah, I think you're talking about Ted Turner.
Ted Turner, right.
Yeah. And I've read his book, which is pretty fascinating. Yeah, I read through all those things.
Hey, this pod is sponsored by Laird Superfoods. So many products to choose from. from your InstaFuel, your coffee, your tea, your smoothies. And I love the superfood creamer and use the hydration powders like the beets, the coconut, the matcha, the turmeric to mix all into my 7 Summit smoothie. And it's so good. Log on to lairdsuperfood.com and get your 20% off when you use the code MARKP20. Okay? So get your Laird Superfood, and I guarantee it will help fuel your journey.
One of the as I was kind of doing some research and I watched a video of yours, and I just thought it meant a lot to me, and I think it mean a lot to some other people. And I want to go through the 6 Ps, and I can remind you of any one of these things, but let me just name some of these right now, because you can go back and you can kind of tell me the reason why you had these as your 6 Ps: purpose, being passionate, patience, persistence, performance, and people.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, the 6 Ps is really how I do everything in my life. I have a mission statement. I have core values. I have goals and objectives that I write down for myself. And the 6 Ps were a way for me to say, how do I do everything in my life? And so the first one, purpose. Everything has to have a purpose bigger than myself. There has to be meaning to it. To just do something to do something, it just was not enough for me. So I need to have a reason to do it that was bigger than me. And primarily,
let me just interrupt really quickly. When at the time, because I think sometimes we fall into things, and sometimes that we there's an inspiration that somebody leads us into what that purpose is, as it relates to Starbucks when there were only 28 stores and you two had met and somebody had put you together and all those things. Did you know that was a purpose at that time, or are you talking about other things post your Starbucks life?
No. Before I went to Starbucks, I had a list of what I wanted to do in my life and how I wanted to act. And I had things I wish I had it here, but I had things on that list that said, I want to lead a company, and everybody in that company is going to get to vote in their own area of expertise. Everybody's going to own a piece of the company. And I had these things that I wanted to do, what kind of organization I wanted to be part of, and why those things were important to me. And that had really formed. And so here I am interviewing with Howard the second time. Yep. And we were comparing those lists. First time it was the criteria that he wanted in somebody. The second time it was, who were we? Who was he? Who was I? And he's going down his list and I'm going down my list. And it was like we'd written each other's lists.
Wow.
And nothing on that list was about making tons of money.
Yep.
It was about doing something special. And coffee, I was an avid coffee drinker. I still am today. And coffee is meaningful to me because it's about conversations. It's about romantic conversations, about reading newspapers. It's about being alone with yourself. It's lots of things go on when you're having a cup of coffee. So purpose bigger than myself is always primarily about serving others. Then the second P is passion. If you're going to have a purpose bigger than yourself, then you damn well better be passionate about it. Yeah. I mean, something has to get you up in the morning to go climb that mountain. That's passion. To be able to do it, to get up to the top, to look out on that view. Well, my passion is again about, it's the passion of serving people, and I'm energetic about it. I mean, I think about it all the time. My mission statement in life is every day I want to nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. And I'm passionate about that. I think about it all the time. There's not a day that goes by that I don't try to do something that lives up to that mission, I'm passionate about it. Then persistence is the third P. That was a word I said about entrepreneurs. If I've learned anything in life, it takes persistence to do whatever you set out to do. There are so many rocks in the river, rocks you never even know about. And every once in a while you'll go boom and your boat will hit one. It might even put a little hole in your boat and you got to figure out how the hell to patch that hole. Or it may just shove you off course and you've got to figure out how to get back on course. But persistence matters. It's the one criteria that I think, if you are that way, helps you to get success in life, whatever success is for you. And so persistence for me is really important. And then patience. Now you'd say persistence and patience. Well, persistence, you have to be persistently patient.
Yeah.
Because not everything comes at the time that you want it to come. I was watching that film, that movie about this young kid climbing El Capitan.
Yeah.
I had no idea what they had to go through. I mean, how many years it took him to plan that course out, to put his hand in the right spot or his foot in the right spot. I had no idea that that's what that took.
Yeah.
And that's patience to do that.
Yeah.
He was persistent about it, but he was patient to figure it out, to get to the top. And then the fourth P, performance. Human beings don't like to be measured. We don't like to be measured in our marriages. We don't like to be measured in our work. And so we kind of push back a little bit. But performance matters, and measurement does matter. And if somebody else doesn't measure us, then we need to measure ourselves. Every night when I come home, I look at myself in the mirror and I ask myself one question before I go to bed. Howard, how did you do today? And it's against these things, against my goals, against my values, against my mission, against my 6 Ps. And I don't perform every day.
Yep.
I don't. Yeah, but I give myself, I forgive myself and I move on to the next day.
Uh-huh.
And then the final P is people. Everything in my life is about people, about serving others. And that drives me. I didn't understand it, 50 years ago, but I understand it today.
Yeah. No, I love all those things. And, some of the things I've done, certainly, literally every single one of those things that I'm looking at this list here: purpose, passion, patience, persistence, performance, people. It's had to do with any kind of success I've ever had. There's a daily discipline about being committed to some cause that I'm behind. Right now, it's climbing these mountains. But if you don't, have that kind of daily discipline, you're purposeful about why you're doing this. In my case, I am climbing because that I do love it. I love the outdoors, but I'm also doing this because I'm able to bring some notoriety around trying to raise money for epilepsy. My daughter has had this since she was 6 years old. She's 20 now. And you got to be passionate, to get to the other side. And so all these things play in performance. If you're not good enough to be on the mountain, bad things can happen. And that all has to do with the persistence, the patience, and working out and following, making sure that you're prepared. Maybe that's another P to get, to that ultimate goal of whatever. And the thing that's really cool, Howard, about you, I've known you for a long time, and you've always been very generous with me, with your time. And that's the only thing that's been, is your time and really being there to listen. And I think when some people in life, whether you want to call it luck or you want to call it skill, I don't know, there's probably a combination of these different things, but you happen to be on probably one of the few great company of all the different ideas that are out there about what people can do. You got on a rocket ship, with the rest of your team, but to really understand the humility and being that type of person, and your number 6 one, which was really interesting, people, because people look up to you, right? And people are looking for you for advice, and you could be somebody who's like, I've kind of, I want to just go off and live in my castle and do those things. Yeah. Or you can really impart that knowledge and pay it forward. And I think you've done that.
Well, thanks. Yeah. I believe in that. That's what we're here to do. And you have to reach out to everybody, even if they don't reach out to you. When you see somebody that needs some help, not advice, but that might need a helping hand, you need to be there to do it. And that's for me, my life.
So I want to jump back a little bit into the Starbucks world, and then I want to jump into these books. But okay, so when you first started, you had 28 stores, you and Howard, and it was a really fascinating story to me that, and I know Howard, I used to play basketball with them. We're kind of on that hug relationship, with him, and so I'm a big fan of his. But I could certainly see how that rather than just ask you stupid questions like where you're from and what's your experience, you're really comparing your value system of how you saw the world, from the past and going forward, and those things really align. And ultimately, when you were there, you guys go from this kind of little small mom and pop type Starbucks store experience to over 15,000 stores, 5 different continents. I mean, that's incredible. And so what was, like, as you look back and as these things were just getting like insane, where was the point where you were talking about the Chicago store that was losing money, you had to figure out that problem, but where was it where the rubber met the road where were looking at each other in a room and you guys were like, this thing is taking off. You knew that you were well on your way.
Yeah, it was a strange experience, but I was in Vancouver, Canada, and we had a store on a corner called Robson Thurlow, which is a corner of Main and Main in Vancouver.
Okay.
For retail. And we had a store in a building that the owner had the option of tearing it down, and we were pretty sure he was going to tear it down. And it was our best store in Vancouver. And I said to our real estate person, see if you can get the corner across the street. And it was in a heritage building, and I thought it might take her 2 years to get it, because the heritage buildings, they're hard to get, and then they're hard to get the permits to do them. Well, she came back in 6 months and said, I have it. And I said, oh no, what do we do now? And so I said, well, let's take it. And if we can't make it work, we can always sublease the old one, get out of it. So the day we opened that second store, our volume on the corner doubled.
So wait. So you have you have two Starbucks stores like 30 yards apart from each other.
Yeah, they were literally 30 yards apart, 90 feet. That was just it, across the street. Yeah. And we opened that one store. We had the one store was doing about $1 million a year. It was one of our best stores in the whole company. And the second store went at a run rate of $1 million a year. When I saw those numbers, I just shit. I said, man, we are really underserving the marketplace. The most interesting thing is one store we called the Suits, the other store we called the Bikers. And they were that different a clientele. And we didn't have any idea what all that meant. But that's when I knew we really had something. And when Howard saw that and I saw that, we said, Katie barred the door, and we started opening stores a lot closer to each other. And it worked pretty much every time. Not every time, but it worked. And it was those kinds of things. And it wasn't like it was always like that. I remember Patience, we opened in San Diego and in Denver, and it took us 2 years to make money in those markets. But we figured it out. And once that got going, then the markets we'd open to, they came around a lot faster. But it was always the number one challenge was getting the right people on the bus, as Jim Collins likes to say. Yeah. And getting enough people. As fast as we were growing, 1 year we opened 2,500 stores. That's just a huge amount. You're hiring probably 50,000 people just for those stores.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, you had to have great people, and then you had to let them loose. You had to get out of their way. My job was to help them understand why we were there. I probably gave the same speech 1,000 times. What our purpose was to serve people, then the other thing was making sure that I knocked down the hurdles for them, that there was nothing blocking them in doing their jobs, and then giving them the freedom to make decisions. And that's how it happened. I remember, Howard, we had our first all-store managers meeting. There were 7,000 people in Key Arena, the Sonics basketball. Sure. I'll bring Sonics up, and Howard and I were sitting down in the front row as the place was filling up, and we looked back and we both asked each other the same question at the same time. How the hell did this happen? That was about the truth.
Yeah.
It wasn't like we did it. They did it.
Hey, I'm excited to introduce our new partner of the pod, Cascade Mountain Tech, an outdoor brand from the Pacific Northwest, which is where I'm from, that offers a great selection of trekking poles. They're incredible. Super coolers, camp chairs, LED lighting, and much more. Right now, Cascade Mountain Tech is offering 15% off your first order by using the code FindingYourSummit15. That is, FindingYourSummit15 when you check out at CascadeMountainTech.com.
Yeah. One of the things that you said, which I think is pretty profound, is that, and this may have come out of the book, It's Not About the Coffee, Lessons on Leadership at a Life at Starbucks. And you said something to the effect of that you were in the people business, not the coffee business.
That's true. We were not in the people business serving coffee. We're in the coffee business. Excuse me. We're not in the coffee business. We weren't in the coffee business serving people. We were in the people business serving coffee.
Yeah. So
and that stuck to this day, as a matter of fact.
Well, yeah. You've held true to that. I mean, it certainly is a place of gathering, right?
Yeah, sure.
We always talk about that, the third place. What was as I go back, always you take a look at your threat assessments, right? When you're building a business. So that's, your classic, your overview and your competition and your market analysis. And, you go through all that exercise, right? And so the thing about selling coffee is we've seen it's a fairly low barrier of entry, right?
Right.
And so you just had a sea of these different people. And I'll bring up a store that kind of, they thought they were going to take you on and they ultimately blew up, Tully's.
Yeah.
And this isn't about Tully's, but
No.
I'm just more interested in the answer of, and maybe you've already answered this, but why a company like Starbucks went all the way, right? Scored the touchdown, climbed the mountain. And other companies, and Tully's isn't alone, but there's other companies that either, they blew up, then blew out, or they just went a certain distance.
Yeah. It has, I think, a lot to do with that understanding that when you compete with other organizations, you're not just competing on the field, you're competing off the field too. You compete for everything. You compete for people, for money, for vision, all those things. I mean, Tully's was an interesting story. Tully's basically, they weren't authentic to themselves. They were trying to be who we were.
Yeah.
And you can't, that doesn't work in life, right? It's just not how it works, It's like the New England Patriots, you can't be them. You can't be Belichick. Belichick is Belichick, and you can be yourself, like Seattle, the Seahawks, they can be themselves, but they can't be Belichick. Pete Carroll is not Belichick, but he's Pete Carroll. And you have to go down your own path. And that's how you have to compete in life. Anytime you just are copying somebody else or something else, there's no soul to it.
I've got, I was looking at this next book that you came out with called The Magic Cup. And the reason why I thought that is fascinating to me is because, and I don't know the exact way to phrase this. There's a guy that kind of the main character, Vince Steadfast, and he's got this fictitious company. So it's like this imaginary tale of this guy that, has to go through all his bumps, his lumps, adversity to find his summit ultimately. Can you tell me a little bit more about what the inspiration behind that book was?
Yeah, the original inspiration came out of anger. I was mad. It was true. And I was mad at how I was on the board of Starbucks, and Howard wanted to lay off some people, which I said, that's fine. But I said, do it all at once. Don't do it 3-4 times because you kill the company. You break trust and it's forever getting it back. And I was really disappointed in what we did. And so it kind of came from that. But over time, I let that go. And I wrote it. I wanted to write a parable about my experiences in life. And so everything pretty much in that book outside of the Harry Potter-esque kind of stuff is true. Layoffs, pink slips without the board even knowing what was going on. The board kind of blocking for the old CEO being greedy, not trusting his people, trying to, take everything out of the company, and all the things that kind of happen along the way. And then Vince Steadfast having to gain confidence in himself and having to have encouragement. You remember he had the boss that was at the other company who encouraged him to take the job in the first place. And she was there for him all the way through. And his people were there for him because they trusted him. And when he faltered, they were there to pick him up, and he trusted them to help him. And it was all the scary things. I have this quote on my office wall: there are no stressful situations, only stressful responses.
Yeah. Love that.
He could have succumbed to all the stressful situations, but he didn't. And his people helped him respond in the right way, and he responded in the right way. And so that's what it was about. It was really a story about servant leadership and about making your way, even when things are terrible, even when the darkest times come, that you can make it. I remember a long time ago, I was one of my first marriage. I had a very unhappy first marriage, and it was unhappy for her and unhappy for me. And yet I couldn't get out of it. I just was fearful. And somebody gave me a book called The Magic of Believing by a man named Claude Bristol. And in the chapter, there was a chapter in that book, and he said, I want you to imagine the worst possible thing that could happen if you take this action. All the way through, will you starve to death?
Yeah.
Will your kids starve? You never work again. You'll never make whatever, have a place to live, all those things. And if you can deal with the worst possible real outcome, because remember, a lot of this, the outcomes that you believe are going to happen are fictitious, then you can make it. And that's how I got through it. I got myself to thinking about what's really the worst thing that could happen. I wasn't going to starve to death.
Yeah.
I had people that I could go to. I could find a job even at McDonald's, whatever it happened to be. And it got me through it. But it was that kind of thing. And that's kind of what the Magic Cup is about. Dealing with the worst possible things that could happen along the way, trusting your friends, trusting the people that you work with, and being true to yourself and being a good human being.
Well, I think that you hit the nail on the head. And I've mentioned this numerous times about really stepping into the fear. And that's so easy to say and it's hard to do. And I've had numerous experiences with that. And, even going back to Front Porch, our classic game company, that we were so creative and we had such a momentum and role. But it was literally like being on an episode of Survivor. And there was just people nipping at our heels and toes and to bring in venture people. And now you get the wrong people who don't have the same, P's that you were talking about, the purpose, the passion, the patience, the persistence, performance. People, you don't have that working in your favor because you have other people who don't share the same value system that you have that are running and calling the shots. It's goofy.
Yeah, and that's in life. Too often we choose partners without thinking about it.
Yeah.
Without thinking, do we really have the same value system? Does my wife like to shoplift? And you think that's not the right thing to do? It's amazing what we do in life. We go to work for companies without thinking about what is their real value system. Not what do they say, but what do they do? And the people that we associate with. Who do we want to associate? We want to associate with people that we have common values with. Not the same people. They have different ideas and thoughts about life, but who they are and do they care about others, et cetera. And it's so important to do that. And that's, what I believe in.
Yeah. I refer to this guy who you either knew or know of, John Wooden, all the time, because he's just got so many just great little sayings and the way he saw the world. But as it relates to something that you just said, one of the things that he was always really encouraging his people, his guys, his players to do is try to improve his immediate circle with making sure that the 5 people that are around you, that are your tightest friends, that if they're not pushing you and if you guys don't share the same core values and system and truth and belief and all those things, that you probably should replace one of those guys and constantly be evaluating, kind of like you were saying earlier in the conversation about every single night before you go to bed, have I performed, right? Have I done all the things in my P's that I need to do? And sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. And we're not perfect, of course. But I think that really helps you elevate your game by having your own little advisory board, if that's what you want to call it, of your best friends telling you the truth, like you did with Howard Schultz. And like, where am I going? Am I doing the right things? And really having that consciousness, because one of the things you also talked about is that book that you've read 200 times or whatever, that talks all about affirmations. And it's so easy to just go about your day and forget about these things if you don't constantly tap back into those things.
Right. It is. You have to remind yourself all the time. I keep, you asked me about my 6 Ps, and as soon as you did, I reached into my briefcase because I carry it with me no matter where I go. And you'd say, well, I know these things by heart, but you know what I found? When there are stressful situations, sometimes I can forget. And so I go grab it and to make sure that I'm on track.
Yeah, I have my little vision board and just exactly. So this is not going to be, this is video of you and I right now, but this will be the audio version. So anybody that's listening, Howard just showed me a visual of his 6 Ps and other things that were on that list of his visual of his vision board. And up in my bathroom, I have it in like a 5x7, and I've written down like the goal, 7 summits and all the things that I have to do on a daily basis to make sure that I'm reinforcing what I need to do to make it to that pinnacle. And at some point in time, knock on wood, hopefully it's next year, I'll get there. But then there's going to be a whole new set of goals, right? Yeah. But that's just, again, I'm visual. And if I don't see those things, then they just get whitewashed and something else will come along.
Yeah. Did you read that article about Edgar Martinez? the other day in the Seattle Times?
I didn't.
You should read that, or you should have him on your show, because he's a guy that went through all those struggles. Remember when the Mariners first took him,
Yeah.
he wasn't so good. He thought he was going to get traded, and what he started to go through and how he changed what he thought about.
Yeah.
And it's really it.
Yeah, one of the greatest hitters in the history of baseball.
Yeah, yeah.
Designated.
And yet at one time he thought he wasn't going to make it, that the Mariners were going to let him go.
And I thought that he just got nominated to be in the Hall of Fame. Is that true?
Right.
Yeah. Great. So as you sit here today, you've written some different books, and you've sat on the board of Starbucks. You were participated as a key employee, to say the least, with the amazing growth. You're at 75. You're as ornery and as sharp and everything else as you were when I knew you 20 years ago. What is your life as you your day to day, how you pay it forward or help people? What is your life like? I do know that you also public speak around the country.
Right. I try to live up to that mission that I said, nurture and inspire the human spirit every day. Most of the time, it's just small stuff. So I have this little habit I do with myself. Every day I have to pick up one piece of garbage off the street. Fortunately, in Seattle, there's an endless supply of inventory. So it's nurture and inspire the human spirit. It keeps me humble. I bend over. I pick up that piece of garbage. I throw it in a garbage can. Little ways. I'm on boards, a couple of nonprofit boards, and on some for-profit boards that I'm slowly but surely winding off of. I mentor 6 second-year MBA students at the University of Washington every year. And I focus on serving others, and that's what I do. And I have 12 students, undocumented students from South and from Central America primarily, that we're helping put through school. And we don't just give them money; we're also their coaches. Yeah. And so it's staying focused on the things that matter to me. When I first retired, I was literally depressed for 2 years. Yeah. Because I did everything that I told my people not to do, and that's get enmeshed and forget who you are. I'd say you're not Starbucks, and Starbucks is not you. We're here to contribute to Starbucks, but it's still Starbucks. Long after we leave, it will go. Yeah. And so one day I was laying on the sofa thinking, God, what am I going to do with my life? It's not worth living, and it's true. And all of a sudden, these words came into my head out of nowhere. Howard, your life's work is still your life's work. Your life's work is still your life's work. And I said, that's true. But I had to figure out a different way of putting to work. That's all. It was the same work. It was just different. It wasn't on this big team where, and all these events and all that stuff. It was quieter, but it was still my life's work. And that's what I've done. I think, and I still set goals. We have a 5-year plan at 75. That's starting to get pretty optimistic, but I have goals that I set for myself. They're goals with my wife, with my grandkids. They're goals about what we want to give away. We're past the accumulating stage anymore in our lives. We want to get rid of stuff, including money, and we do. And so, but I need goals. I need something to keep me going, and it's mostly revolves around helping others now.
I could not agree with you anymore. I mean, we're at slightly different stages of life right now, but the common theme is goals. And, for me, I mean, I am so self-motivated, but even self-motivated people need to have a kick in the ass and have something to point, or, I'm doing some 10Ks. I mean, it goes way beyond that. Those are just physical things. But if I don't have those goals, then I seem to float, and life just becomes very mundane, and it's just not a good place to be. Average, that's easy. Great is hard.
Yeah, there's that old saying, if you don't know where you're going, will get you there.
Say that one more time.
If you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there.
Yeah. That's so true.
I want to know where I'm going all the time.
Well, you've gone and come a long way, and I'm proud to call you a friend, and you've always been there for me, and I'm so glad that we were able to reconnect. Very grateful for that. Where can people find you?
They can just email me they can go to my website at howardbehar.com, or my email address is hb, my initials, at howardbehar.com. I'm slow on my emails sometimes, but I get back to everybody.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love that. Hey, listen, thank you so much for coming on. And there's so much value that the listener is going to get out of this. It's just about life's lessons and doing those things that are important.
Well, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to catch up again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for dropping in and listening to another amazing episode of Finding Your Summit. Truly incredible people doing spectacular things in life, and I hope you were inspired just like I continue to be. Look, I am super grateful that you came in and subscribed to this pod, and would be more than appreciative if you gave the show a ratings and review on iTunes. Trust me, it matters. And then also go share it with your friends, of course. Okay, until next week, go do something great, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion. Bye. Hey, and thank you so much for listening to the Find Your Summit podcast. We are so glad to have you along for this journey. And if you enjoy the show, please tell a friend, share it on iTunes, spread it to the planet. We're looking to broadcast this to every person that is out there because, as you know, everybody has their own summit that they're going after. Okay, if you're looking to follow my journey, you can find that through my social links on markpattisonnfl.com. That's Mark, M-A-R-K, Pattison, P-A-T-T-I-S-O-N, NFL.com. So, until the next podcast, just remember, clear eyes, full hearts, and remember, it takes a little more to make a champion, so make it happen. Thank you. Bye.